You're listening to The White Rabbit, conversations on the art of presenting in a rather noisy world. Your hosts are Matt Krause and Alper Rozanes. Matt helps leaders of international companies speak, write, and present with confidence. Alper is a communications trainer and a startup investor with a diverse portfolio of companies in Barcelona. If you like this podcast, please share it with friends and colleagues. Now, on to Matt and Alper for today's conversation.
Alper, last week we were talking about Matt's ideal client, or the client who takes Matt's work and does the best with it. And so today we're going to turn the tables and talk a little bit about Alper's ideal client. And I was wondering...
My favorite topic.
Yeah, and I was wondering, should we make this the client that Alper likes to deal with the most? Or is this about the client that takes Alper's work and has the most success with it?
That's a very good question, and I think they're intrinsically connected. I feel that they're intrinsically connected.
Okay.
I would rely more heavier on the first one, like the client that I like working with the most. But I also see that it can be really connected in a good way to the second part. And when I say that, I'm actually imagining a scenario where there are two people in my mind, and they have equal levels of strengths, skill sets, business acumen, etc., etc. And these two people, let's say they are going to want to climb the corporate ladder. And I believe when the time comes that there will be a fine edge that lies in front of them. And I think this edge lies in the nuances. And I think that one such nuance that can make or break your professional journey, let's say, is actually the way you present and the way you communicate. So I think that would be the defining parameters of the conversation that you and I are going to have about my ideal client. And I have seen from a lot of years of working with people that there are three traits that actually stand out to define them. It doesn't mean to say that every single client that I work with come with traits. No, but I mean, that's why we say ideal. We don't say, I mean, we're not saying what is the absolute common ground. No, that's why I'm saying the ideal. And the first one is actually recognizing this thing that I just talked about, recognizing the power of exceptional communication or exceptional presentations.
Yeah, when you mentioned this to me, you mentioned these four traits to me before the podcast, and I was wondering, tell me, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, you and I are very familiar with the situation of business communication. It's usually flooded with data and ideas and innovations and you know what. True. I think there is a bridge that can connect all these elements to the people you're talking to the stakeholders, to the audience that you're presenting to. And it can be your team in the same company. It can be a group of investors, potential partners, whatever. I think the bridge that will be able to connect all these elements is the quality of your presentation. And when I say that, I'm not just talking about your slides. I'm talking about the entire experience. The entire experience, which I'm sure we have talked about this before, is consisting of actually three things. The way you organize your content, the way you design your slides, and the way you deliver it. And in my line of work, an ideal client actually knows that a presentation isn't just some slides, isn't just some slides that you project on a screen and talk about them. It's and I don't want to dig too much into the storytelling thing here, but I also believe that, yes, it is actually a storytelling tool. And they recognize that mastering this tool can be a game changer, and it has the potential, it has the power to set them apart from the crowd and actually position them as leader. May be a strong word, but I would say it can position them as communicators making a difference. So I think that would be the first step. They recognize this power and they respect it.
And then you also mentioned point number two. And when I asked you about point number two, you said that the summary of point number two was understand that this is not an overnight process and that it's a journey of mastery, and you're going to reap the benefits for the rest of your life, or for years at least. So what did you mean by that?
What I meant was understanding that we are not born with good communication skills. I mean, it's not to say that we never have them, but when I look at good communicators, I don't believe most of them were born with it. I don't think it's a talent that we come to this world with, but I think it's a skill set that we can acquire throughout time, throughout a lot of repetitions, rehearsals, and practicing. And this journey is never achieved overnight. I mean, you
okay.
know the famous saying, Rome wasn't built in a day. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
little bit of a cliche, but I don't think you can become a good communicator, a competent communicator, an impactful presenter overnight.
Okay.
So it's not a work that's going to last a few hours. We're not going to have one day, 6 hours in a corporate meeting room, and you're not going to turn into a good presenter. It demands dedication, practice, and in my experience, I see that it requires also a lot of iterations. So the ideal client, in my case, is actually someone who appreciates the significance of this journey, and they can welcome feedback and practice relentlessly. And at the end of the day, they understand that at least the initial stages, let's say, because we're trying to create change in the person, we're trying to create change in the way that they were accustomed to doing things, especially they appreciate that the initial stages might involve challenges. It's not going to be a walk in the park. It's not going to be a piece of cake.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But the final outcome is worth every effort, because you will be able to present with confidence, with clarity, with charisma, all those things that come with repetition and working on it.
So as a potential client, so I shouldn't be thinking, hey, I'm just gonna call Alper once, I'm gonna send him my slide deck, and I get to shake the dust off my hands and go home, and the next day everything's gonna be cool and I'm gonna be the most awesome presenter ever. So that's an unrealistic expectation. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm hoping they will like my slides if I redo them, and I can almost guarantee that they will. I mean, their presentation will be upgraded in terms of visual aspects, of course. But when you set the bar that high, that requires work, and it's not just overnight. It's going to take practice, and it's going to take sessions. Of course, this is not to say that we need to work at least 5 years before you feel confident on the stage. Of course, that's not the case, but it's not going to happen overnight.
True.
That may seem like the negative part, but the positive part about that is once you get those skills, they will stay with you, I believe, throughout the rest of your life.
Okay.
Let's say you have this important board meeting coming up in 3 months, and we work together diligently, and you become very good at presenting, you become very good at communicating yourself, and you ace that meeting. When that meeting is over, those skills won't go anywhere. They will stay with you. They will stay with you for the rest of your life, and you will be able to enjoy them, put them into practice with any encounter that you find yourself in. So it is an investment in terms of time, well, in terms of money as well, but it's an investment that pays off very well in the long run. Well, in the short term and in the long run as well.
Okay. And then point number 3. Can I ask you about point number 3?
Yes.
I am totally wondering what you mean by this, because I thought, wow, this sounds really fascinating, but I don't know what Alper means by this. You said, recognize the fine line between persuasion and fit. And I'm reading that and wondering, what does Alper mean by that? So tell me more. What do you mean?
Well, what I mean by that is this mindset change that I myself experienced in the last several years. And because, I mean, you and I have similar backgrounds, especially in Toastmasters or speaking clubs, where it was very important to become a persuasive speaker. It was very important to be able to convince other people. And I am guilty of that too. I mean, this is not to say that it's a crime, but let's say it's a communication style. And I now look back and think that I was guilty of practicing that as well. But I strongly believe that there's a subtle difference between trying to win an audience over through persuasion and on one side, and on the other side, genuinely, honestly gauging, assessing if there's a match between what you will be talking to them about, what you will be proposing to them. I mean, of course, the presentation will most certainly include the proposition, and to see if there's a match between what you will be proposing and their needs, their own needs, the audience's needs. So I understand. Go ahead.
So let me see if I'm following you correctly so far. So you're saying it would be an unrealistic expectation of mine if I'm like, okay, well, I brought Alper in and he's going to teach me how to make everybody follow me to the ends of the earth, and I'll be the most persuasive person that ever walked in the history of mankind. I'll be the most persuasive person ever. So that you're saying that would be an unrealistic expectation. Is that correct?
Matt, if I could do that, if that were the case, you and I would not be doing this podcast. I would be... we would not be recording this episode. But no, that would be a grossly misaligned expectation. And
true. If we had that skill, we might be... If we were doing this podcast, we would be recording it from our private Lear Jets, right?
Yeah, sipping Mai Tais. By the way, I have never had a Mai Tai, so I just know the reference. I don't know what the drink is about. Maybe I won't even make it. But yeah, in this case, going back to the client, I think the client, my ideal client, let's say at least, sees this difference between persuasion and authenticity. I'm not saying that they cannot be together, but and I understand that persuasion is an, let's say, essential component of presenting and talking confidently, but I don't think it should be at the expense of being authentic and not trying to find if there's a real fit between what you are proposing and what the audience is.
Okay. And then point number 4, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but I want to hear a little bit more about it today. You've mentioned for point number 4 that the client should understand that a no today is not a no forever. Did I get that right?
Yes. And again, like the previous point, I was also guilty of thinking that every conversation should end with a yes or a signed deal or a sale, etc. And this is something that I usually bring up with my clients when we work on their sales pitches or sales presentations. This is more about, it's connected to the idea of persuasion that we talked about, but it's more relevant to the world of sales.
Okay.
And I believe, I started believing recently in the last, again, several years, not all the time, that not every conversation, not every presentation ends with an immediate collaboration. And I think that's perfectly fine. And the most important thing, I believe, is the perspective that we bring into these, let's say, conversations.
Okay.
Now, and I think the word I had used, the phrase I had used before was, a no today doesn't mean a no forever.
Okay.
And if we can appreciate the value of, let's say, keeping an open communications channel to nurture the relationship and staying receptive, let's say, to potential future collaboration and potential future opportunities, I think it would create a much stronger bond, a much stronger connection between me as a presenter and between the audience, whom I will not be pushing towards getting a yes. So a no today definitely doesn't mean a no forever. And I think it's in our mutual interest as a presenter, as a speaker, and as the audience as well to come to terms with that.
Okay, so again, with one of Matt's, I guess this is becoming kind of Matt's Lear Jet questions. We could shorthand it that way. So a Lear Jet question for you. So if I am a sales manager and I have the expectation of my salespeople that you're going to make one call and you're going to get a yes or a no, and it's going to be clear cut, and I don't want you wasting any time on somebody who says no today, and there is no way that I'm going to let talking to Alper change my mind about that. You would probably, if I'm hearing you correctly, you would probably say this is not an ideal client. Is that right?
Well, if there's anyone who can help people achieve that, because I think it's an extreme scenario, I am not that person.
Okay.
Because to me, it's more about mutual interests and maintaining long-term relationships. And I'm not saying that you cannot do these and get a yes at every single call that you make. Of course, maybe it's possible, but I don't think I would be the right person to guide you in that direction.
Okay.
Because I honestly do not believe it's probability probably as much as you would like me to believe, and so no, you wouldn't enjoy working with me either.
Yeah, I was thinking about, okay, if there's a person like that, a person who expects and gets a yes on an immediate yes on every presentation, we're gonna have to buy a third Lear Jet, because not only will Alper have a Lear Jet and Matt will have a Lear Jet, but that sales manager is going to have a Lear Jet too.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
And it's also ironic that probably you and I have absolutely no idea about the current market rate of a Lear Jet.
Yeah, we have no idea how
Mai Tais for that matter.
Yeah, well, it's like we don't even know what goes into Mai Tai. So we're a million miles away from knowing how much a Lear Jet costs.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, on that note, so we've got to wrap up for today. So thank you very much, Alper.
Thank you. It's been
all
fun.
right.
I'll talk to you next week.
I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to The White Rabbit with Matt Krause and Alper Rozanes. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or through your favorite feed.